Today, we're unpacking a universal, deeply lived mystery. We are looking at exactly why you become an entirely different person the moment you are around your family. We're going to skip the surface level advice here and jump directly into the heavy, profound reality of what happens when you cross your childhood threshold. Okay, let's just dive right into this massive, jarring contrast. Picture this. Out in the real world, in your daily life, you're a highly competent, calm adult, right? You navigate your career, you mediate complex conflicts with your friends or coworkers, you pay your bills, and people genuinely respect you for your grounded, mature presence. But then, the holidays roll around. Or maybe it's just a regular Sunday dinner. You pull into the driveway of your parents' house, you open the front door, and within, 15 minutes, a seemingly innocent comment is made about your hair, or your job, or literally just the way you're chopping vegetables. And suddenly, you snap. Your chest tightens up, you instantly morph back into a defensive, irritable teenager. All of that hard-earned adult composure, it just vanishes into thin air. You find yourself arguing over something completely trivial, feeling entirely misunderstood, and reacting with a kind of emotional volatility that you literally haven't exhibited anywhere else in your adult life.
And then, when you're driving home from that family gathering, white-knuckling the steering wheel, you probably feel this deep, heavy sense of shame. You're asking yourself, why did I act like that? Why can't I just be normal around them? Why do I regress? Well, I want you to really let this next reality sink in, because the clinical psychology on this is incredibly clear. This baffling emotional regression is not a personal failure, it's not hypocrisy, and it is absolutely not a weak character. What you are experiencing in that living room is the result of an invisible, highly predictable law of emotional physics that governs human behavior. You aren't just walking into a house, you're walking into a deeply entrenched field of invisible forces.
Now, to really understand why this happens, we need a massive perspective shift. We have to stop looking at our family as just a collection of individuals with, toxic traits or bad intentions. Instead, clinical family systems theory teaches us to view the family as a chronic anxiety system. Think of your family as a highly integrated emotional organism. Over generations, decades of history, this system has learned to regulate its internal tension, its stress, and its baseline anxiety by forcing its members into fixed, interdependent roles. It is an automated, historical reflex. Your family isn't necessarily sitting there plotting to hurt you. The system itself is simply operating on autopilot, trying to maintain its ancient equilibrium by keeping everyone exactly where they have always been.
You can think of this as a psychological gravity field. When you step into that house, you're stepping into a dense, heavy atmosphere made up of unwritten expectations. There's this literal contagion of emotional reactivity happening in the room. If one person is tense, the system automatically distributes that tension to everyone else, like an electrical current. There's an incredibly powerful, unconscious drive for what researchers call togetherness. But listen, this togetherness isn't about warm hugs and love, it's a demand for emotional fusion. It demands that everyone feel the exact same way and play the exact same part. And because of this, the system has a built-in, almost aggressive resistance to your individual autonomy. Your separateness, your unique adult identity, it disrupts the gravity. The system feels that disruption and it violently pulls back against you with immense invisible force.
So, what actually happens to you when you step into that gravity field? Well, in your normal daily life, you operate from what we call your differentiated self. This is the real you, the adult you. You're objective, you're guided by your own internal principles, and you're highly capable of thinking before acting. But that psychological gravity field we just talked about, its entire biological and systemic purpose is to force you out of that mature self. It forcefully snaps you backward into your historical childhood role self. And this version of you is entirely anxiety-driven. It's highly reactive, it's shaped completely by the needs of others in the room. The system needs you to be the fixer, or the mess, or the invisible one, or the rebel, because that specific role acts as a required shock absorber for the whole family's underlying tension. Which brings us to a really profound question. Why does this happen so incredibly fast? Why does all your adult logic, all the therapy sessions you've done, all those self-help concepts you've totally mastered, why does it all just vanish before a single word is even spoken in that living room? You might literally tell yourself in the car, okay, I'm going to remain calm this time. I am an adult. Yet within seconds of walking in, you are vibrating with frustration. Why does your physical body react before you can even form a conscious thought?
This brings us to the astonishing reality of our biology, specifically the autonomic nervous system. Somatic psychology and neuroscience show us that we are constantly, subconsciously reading our environment for cues of safety and threat.
When you are around your family, you aren't just listening to the words coming out of their mouths. Your nervous system is frantically registering 1,000 microscopic, invisible signs. It's the highly specific pitch of your mother's sigh. It's the slight micro-tension in your father's jaw. It's the familiar, heavy silence lingering in the hallway. Your biological mechanism recognizes these exact signals from your earliest, most vulnerable years, and it instantly, literally in milliseconds, adjusts your bodily energy for either intense defense or total submission.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is this. Your conscious mind is completely bypassed. The body keeps the score. Long before your rational adult brain can even parse out the actual sentence that was just spoken to you, your deepest, oldest brain structures have already sounded a massive alarm. That sudden racing heart, the tight, shallow breathing in your chest, that hot flash of irritation, I need you to know those are not character flaws. They are visceral, biological alarm signals orchestrated by a nervous system that remembers exactly how much emotional pressure is historically in this room. Your body is literally bracing for an emotional impact it remembers from decades ago.
I'm going to say this next part slowly, because I really want the reality of this invisible field to wash over you. You are not only reacting to what they said, you are reacting to the role you are being pulled back into. That intense, defensive anger you feel. It isn't really about the casual, passive-aggressive comment regarding your career or your lifestyle. Your anger is a profound, instinctual rebellion against the feeling of being emotionally erased. You are viscerally feeling the systemic pull trying to drag you backward into a diminished, historical version of yourself, and your entire biological being is fighting that erasure. Now, why on earth does the family system demand this specific role from you? It relies on a deeply ingrained adaptive mechanism called reciprocal over- and under-functioning. It sounds super academic, but it's basically just emotional homeostasis. Imagine a playground seesaw. If one parent historically manages their own deep, unaddressed anxiety by being dominant, over-functioning, and highly controlling, well, the system absolutely requires someone else to under-function just to keep that seesaw balanced. Your regression into an anxious, quiet, or immature state actually serves a critical structural purpose for them. Your perceived inadequacy or your reactive outburst automatically calms the underlying anxiety of the larger system. It subconsciously proves to the family that the old rules still apply, and therefore the system is safe.
Let's look a little deeper under the hood at the exact mechanics of this pull. Because this isn't magic, right? It is deeply ingrained psychological mechanics. First, you have interlocking emotional triangles. This means if two people in the family have tension between them, they will automatically pull you in as a third point just to diffuse their own stress. Then, there are those micro-expressions we mentioned, instantly triggering your deepest nonverbal memories. And perhaps most powerfully of all, there is the echo of internalized parental voices. As children, we absorb the judgments of our caretakers like sponges. When we physically re-enter the space with them, those internal critics in our own heads get handed a massive megaphone. All of these triggers are firing off simultaneously, which proves that your reaction is a systemic response to a highly charged environment. It is not a conscious logical choice you are making.
Once you start seeing the family as an emotional ecosystem desperately seeking balance, everything just makes sense. To the system, your new, hard-won adult maturity is not celebrated as a victory. It is perceived as a threat to the equilibrium. Your independence, your calm boundaries, your absolute refusal to play the old game, it disrupts the fragile, anxious togetherness that has kept the family floating for decades. So when they push your buttons, it's rarely because they are consciously trying to hurt you. This system is just instinctively trying to pull you back into the fold to stabilize its own chronic anxiety.
Okay, so if we are up against immense biological reflexes, decades of nonverbal memory, and an entire family ecosystem that views our maturity as an active threat, how on earth do we survive Thanksgiving dinner? How do we ever step out of this highly automated, deeply ingrained script? Because we know that just telling ourselves to calm down doesn't work. We need a completely different strategy for mastery here.
The ultimate goal here is a concept defined in family systems research as the differentiation of self. Now, I want you to notice what this definition does not say. It doesn't say cutting your family off entirely and running away to the woods. And it definitely doesn't say screaming your truth at the dinner table until they finally agree with you. Differentiation of self is the profound, quiet ability to remain emotionally separate and objective while actively relating to the members of your family system.
It means you can exist right in the middle of that intense psychological gravity field. You can sit right there at the dinner table. You can hear the heavy sigh and see the judgmental microexpressions without being pulled down by them.
So how do we actually execute this in real time? We use something called the maturity awareness approach. Step 1. Settle into neutral observation. The absolute second you feel your chest tighten, you have to pause your bodily reaction. Take a breath and consciously step back inside your own mind. You want to become a detached scientist, just calmly observing the family theater unfold. Step 2. Recognize the automated script. Look at the dynamic happening right in front of you and silently say to yourself, the system is anxious right now. It is trying to pull me into a triangle to relieve its stress. Step 3. Respond from your differentiated self. Because you have successfully paused that automatic reflex, you can now actually choose an action based on your deeply held adult principles, rather than your childhood fears.
When you master this awareness, it completely transforms the way you communicate. There is a vast, literally unbridgeable difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is what happens when your autonomic nervous system completely takes over the driver's seat. It's driven entirely by emotional reflexes and the magnetic pull of family fusion. It's defensive, it's incredibly fast, and it always feeds the system's anxiety. Responding, however, is beautifully slow. It is driven by your intellectual reasoning and your incredibly solid sense of self. When you respond, you don't even bother defending yourself against a petty critique. You simply let it hang there in the air, maintaining your calm, emotional boundary, because you no longer rely on the system's approval to validate your existence.
So, the absolute crucial takeaway here is this. You can participate in the play without forgetting who you truly are. You can visit your childhood home, you can engage in the old traditions, you can genuinely love these people, but you do it as a grounded adult visitor, not as an absorbed extension of their chronic anxiety. Maintaining a calm, thinking, observational perspective is your ultimate protection. It literally acts as an invisible shield against the emotional contagion in the room. And ironically, this is what allows for deep, genuine connection, a connection based on reality rather than the sacrifice of your own identity. Which brings us to a deeply contemplative question that I want to leave floating in your mind today. You now know the invisible mechanics of the room. You can clearly see the gravity field. You understand the biological alarms ringing in your own chest. So, the next time you put your hand on that doorknob and you walk through that childhood door, what will you do? Will you automatically slip right back into the role historically assigned to you just to calm the system's anxiety? Or will you pause, observe the theater, stand firmly in your differentiated self, and consciously rewrite the script? The choice, and the profound, quiet freedom that comes with it, is entirely yours.